Hey Floss Tube, this is Brian. Welcome back. This is my 77th Floss Tube video, and I'm excited to share with you what I have been working on this week. First of all, I want to welcome you. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I hope that you enjoy the things that I have to share with you. And if you are coming back, thank you for coming back and watching my videos. I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed the comments that I've had this week, and so I'm going to respond to some comments before I give you an update of what's been going on. So first of all, Gail asked me about Amish Life, which is the piece that I've been working on this week. She noticed that it looks like there are a lot of fractional stitches on that piece, and she asked me if they were going to be covered by backstitch and if I was when I was going to do the back stitching. So I have a hard time wrapping my head around back stitching as I go on a piece like that, because I don't have a good feel for where to start and where to stop back stitching. So I just wait until the end and I back stitch after I finish all of the cross stitching. Amish Life does have a lot of back stitching. It's a piece that I expect I'm going to be back stitching for several weeks before it's finished, just because there's so much back stitching on it. I've done that before, and it doesn't really bother me. I don't mind back stitching. In fact, I love back stitching because it kind of brings everything out into detail and makes things a lot more crisp if the design is designed for back stitching. The only thing that I have a hard time with about backstitching is usually when I start backstitching, I will work on that piece until it is completely finished. And so if that takes a few weeks, then I get a little bit worried about pushing off all of my other projects that are wanting to be stitched. So. But yeah, there are a lot of fractional stitches in Amish Life. Mostly around the people is where they are, in the foreground where there's a lot more detail. And there are quarter stitches and 3/4 stitches charted on that chart. So there are places where I've done 3/4 stitches, and basically they're charted as 2/4 stitches without a back stitch line going through them on the chart. And I've just looked at the design and kind of made a judgment as to which color I think that should be the one that has the cross that completes the 3/4 stitch. My general rule is if it's something that is going to be in the foreground in front of something else, then that's the color that I use for the other leg of the 3/4 stitch. So yeah, I'll try to, when I show you Amish Life, I'll show you some examples of that if I can remember. Linda asked me if I stitch in hand, and I had somebody else also ask me that. I'm sorry, I forgot who else it was. No, I do not. I stitch on a frame. I use Quantum Millennium frame. I have kind of played around with hoops a little bit. I have tried a Q-snap, but I can't figure out how to load the fabric on a Q-snap. So I really love my Quantum frame. It gives me all the tension that I could ever want. When I first started stitching on linen, the shop owner who taught me how said, oh, you don't need to stitch with a hoop on linen, you can stitch in hand. And so for years I stitched in hand. But I've gotten so that I would rather stitch two-handed. It's hard to stitch two-handed on linen, in hand. And quite frankly, I don't get as consistent tension when I stitch in hand as I do when I stitched on a frame. I like having the fabric taut because that helps me get consistent tension in my stitches. When I stitch in hand, I can't do that because the fabric's all wobbly. So no, I don't stitch in hand. Emily asked me to talk about the men's stitching group that I stitch with, And I think that she is talking about the men's stitching night that we had at the attic a couple weeks ago. That was a one-time event. It's not something that happens every week. It's just that Gary Parr, who does Fiber Talk, was here in town, and he decided to try to get to see if there were any male stitchers that wanted to come to the attic and stitch with him. And Jean, the owner of the attic, agreed to keep the shop open that night for our event. She usually is closed Wednesday nights. So it was a one-time event, and it was really great. I don't know that there's a lot to talk about it. We had a good time stitching. There was one time when I actually made a mistake, and I was hesitant to start pulling stitches out because I didn't want to admit that I made a mistake. So I thought, well, I'll pull them out later. But then I thought, oh, this is just stupid, and so I pulled them out and fixed my mistake. But we had a great time. It'd be kind of nice to have a more regular thing, but I can't commit to a weekly. I can't commit to a weekly commitment of stitching somewhere else every night, because there are nights when I have stuff to do. But yeah, it was a really great time. I was going to say, what happens at men's stitching night stays at men's stitching night, but there's no secrets to tell anyway. Gail asked me if how my arm's doing. It's still healing, and she asked me if I've really switched stands. The Lowry stand that I bought, it works well, but I don't like stitching in a couch. I get all hunched over and slouched down, and so it hurts my back to stitch in the couch. As I've said before, I stitch at the kitchen table on a hard wooden chair. That helps me keep my posture. So I don't really have a good place that I've decided that I could use, and then I like the light that I get stitching on the kitchen table as opposed to on the couch. I have to finagle some things to get enough light to be able to stitch. So I'm back to using what I was before, and my arms is not hurting, and it's getting better slowly, I think. So Betty asked me about the crocheted nativity that I was working on, and also about the Afghan that I was knitting from my daughter. So that means Betty's a longtime viewer, because I was working on that crocheted nativity a couple years ago, and I kind of lost interest in it. Part of the problem is I think it needs to be done with acrylic yarn. I don't know what it would be like if I used wool, and I have a hard time working with acrylic yarn anymore. I don't like the feel that it has on my needle, on my knitting needle or crochet needle. Sometimes it squeaks, and that just really bugs me. So it wasn't an enjoyable experience, and I kind of got distracted from it. I really need to do that, because my wife mentioned it this Christmas that I hadn't finished it. So I think I probably should pull it back out. I have a bunch of heads crocheted somewhere, crocheted and stuffed, and yeah, I just need to get working on it. My daughter's Afghan, all the squares are knit, and right now I have been working on weaving in ends, which is another task that I just really hate. And I've got I think I've been through more than half of the squares. So there's a lot of squares that I have a few more squares that I have to weave ends in. And then I've decided I'm going to knit a border around each square, which means I'm going to have to do a lot of math, because I'm going to have to figure out I'm going to have to figure out how to pick up stitches, a consistent number of stitches along the edges of those squares. Every square has a different number of stitches and a different number of rows, so that is a daunting idea to me, to pick up a square and pick up the right number of stitches so that it doesn't ripple, and I've been avoiding it. So one of these days I'll get a little bit of courage and start working on both those projects, I guess. Okay. Also, Julie asked me about Four Seasons, which is the design that I was stitching last week. She asked me if it was still available, and Julie, yes, it is still available. It is available for purchase on the Modern Folk Embroidery website. I'll put a link to it down below. It is available as a PDF download, and I think he sells paper charts. I don't remember, but you can definitely buy it as a PDF download. During the stitch along, there was sections of the charts that were made available throughout the year, and you bought each section separately, and now it is available for purchase as one full chart. So that's it. Okay. Also, if you remember last week, I announced a giveaway for 3 charts, 3 copies of the Amish Life chart that I'm going to be giving away, and I have drawn names. I had a lot of interest in that chart. A whole bunch of people commented. I had 104 people who commented and expressed an interest in receiving the chart. And I've drawn names, and as I said, the first name that I drew was for the leaflet, and the winner of the leaflet is Joan Niffen. So Joan, congratulations. There are also two copies of the chart that are pages that were torn out of the original magazine, and I've drawn 2 names for that. The first winner is Catherine, and there's no last name. So Catherine, I will probably post a comment on this in reply to your comment, letting you know that you have won. And then the second winner is Jane Murray. So Joan, Catherine, and Jane, congratulations. I am excited to send this chart out to you. If you will send me an email or PM me on Instagram, my email address is in the notes below. You can send me an email that way, and let me know your address. I would be very happy to mail these charts to you, and I hope that you enjoy stitching them and working on this chart as much as I have. So congratulations, everybody. So I have one other thing that I want to share with you before we get started talking about my progress. I have been dealing with startitis lately, and so I've been thinking about what I am going to start when I get to the end of my rotation. And I thought, as I've been going through my charts, I thought I'd share with you something that I would like to stitch someday. This is a design by The Silver Lining. It's a guy who, I don't know if he's still active. He designed he charted a whole bunch of flowers. This is called Classic Pride, and it's an iris, and it's a dark purple iris. I really like this, and I would like to stitch this someday. His patterns are really quite nice. I've actually stitched 2 other iris of his, but I don't have them to show you. My aunt asked me to stitch them several years ago for her, so they're hanging up in her living room somewhere in Massachusetts. But she asked me to stitch them for her. It took me a year to stitch because at the time I wasn't parking. I think now that I park, that they wouldn't take, they weren't that big. So now that I'm parking, I think that they would take, you know, 2 in a year, so 6 months. I think I would be able to do this in a couple of months, maybe. Maybe I'm too confident in my abilities, but they're really nice. They're not hard. The ones that I stitched a yellow one, a yellow iris and a pink iris. And she made us a quilt in exchange for me stitching that. So we have a really nice quilt from her. She's a quilter and actually owns a quilting business and does long arm quilting. But that is Classic Pride by The Silver Lining. The designer's name is Mark Sastad, I think is how you pronounce it. So yeah, that is something I would like to stitch someday. I've had a great week. Work-wise, things are looking up. It's going to be really busy next week because we have visitors coming from Norway, and that means lots of meetings. So I'm going to be spending a whole bunch of time in the meetings next week. But I have been able to solve several problems that I've been facing recently, and it makes me feel really good about work. So life otherwise is going very well. My daughter, I showed you her cross-stitch piece that she finished last week. We are getting her ready to leave. She, as I mentioned before, she is going to be serving a mission for our church in Argentina. And in a couple of weeks, yeah, it's getting closer all the time. In a couple of weeks, we will be putting her on a plane to fly, and she'll be flying to Mexico City. She'll spend 6 weeks in Mexico City with training and more practice on learning Spanish. She took 4 years of Spanish in high school, so she's kind of familiar with Spanish already. So she's going to be in an intermediate Spanish class to kind of help her learn more Spanish. And so 2 weeks she leaves for Mexico, and then 6 weeks after that she'll fly down to Argentina. So we're working on getting her prepared and ready to go, and that means getting a lot of stuff and figuring out how to pack everything so that it will fit in suitcases. So anyway, we're really excited for her. She's really excited. She's got a paper chain and is counting days, so she's excited to go. Anyway, stitching wise, it's been a great week, and since today is the 1st of February, I think I'll post a couple of charts showing an update of what I have been doing. The first chart that I'm going to show you is my stitch trend for the last year, and as you can see, I stitched every day this month in January, and I put in a lot more stitches than I have been in the past 3 or 4 months. So it looks like my stitch slump, if you can call it that, is over. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I seem to be working on projects that I've reached the point where I'm working on projects where they have a lot of negative space. So it's been really great. Here's a Pareto showing the number of days that I worked on each project. I worked on 4 projects this month, and I've really enjoyed working on them. It's been a great month for me. I also finished 2 pages on 2 of my a page each on 2 of my projects, and here's a Pareto showing that. So it feels like I'm making progress and hitting milestones, which is always really good. So that's really exciting. What have I been working on? I have been working on Amid Amish Life. And as I've mentioned before, this is a design that was originally in the early 1980s, it's like the March, May, and July issues, 1987 issues of Cross Stitch and Country Crafts. It's also available in this book, 101 Best Loved Designs from Cross Stitch and Country Crafts. There are 3 separate designs that can also be stitched together as one piece. I'm stitching them together as one piece. This is also available as a leaflet, and I understand that it was also in the final issue of Cross Stitch and Needlework, which was published in, I think, December 2016. It was a retrospective of basically the best of designs of cross stitch and needlework and cross stitch of country crafts, kind of like this book. So anyway, I am stitching it on 25 count Wedgewood Lugana, and I am stitching it with 3 strands of DMC, and excuse me. And as you can see a picture of what this looked like the last time you saw it. And I have made good progress. It's been a good. I'm really happy with what I've been able to stitch. It's about the same as what I have been stitching every time I pull this out for a week, you know, just a little bit over a long time really gives you good progress. So this is about the 6th. I think it's about the 6th time that I've worked on this, the 6th week, and this is what it looks like now. So yeah. So I finished basically 2 diagonals. And the big milestone is I finished the first design. I finished hanging the quilts. So this is all finished. And when I did that, this design, visiting the neighbors, the 10 by 10 grids don't match up. And I've been kind of working through that. So when I finished this design, I decided that I wanted to make my 10 by 10 grids line up on this page. So I am stitching an extra wide diagonal. This is actually, instead of 10 stitches wide, this is 17 stitches wide. And so that is making it so that this diagonal is revealing a whole lot more of this design. So to me, it looks like this house is getting really close to being finished. And I finished the chimney, the wide part of the chimney. So now we're back to the narrow part of the chimney that's going to come up like this. The roof definitely is almost finished. You can see the slope here. Yeah, and we're seeing more. You can see this is a horse right here. So we're seeing more of the horse. This is not stitched because it is a sign, and it's not stitched. So there's going to be a big open rectangle right here. So yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a look. Okay, one example of where there's 3/4 stitches is right here in this quilt. These diagonals were charted as 1/4 stitches. And so then I had to decide which color I thought needed to be more prevalent. And the color that I wanted to be more prevalent, I made the second diagonal in the 3/4 stitches. That's the example that I have that's most that I remember most, but there's some places like through in their clothing and stuff. You can also see, if you look closely, you can see that there's 1/4 stitches all the way through here where the outlines will fill in the rest of the stitch. So, yeah, okay, confession time. Let me get this a little bit straighter. If you are going to stitch this, don't make the mistake that I made. because it is really starting to get on my nerves. So this is the called for fabric, and I like the color of blue, and I couldn't find a similar color in a higher count fabric. So this is 25 count. I was worried about the coverage, so I decided to stitch with 3 strands. I am never going to stitch with 3 strands again. So if you are planning on starting this, I would highly recommend to do whatever you can to make it so that you can stitch with 2 strands. Either find a blue that you think will look good in a higher count fabric, or another thing I think that I've thought that I could have done is I could have found DMC floss that matched this color, and then just stitched in all of the stuff that wasn't charted as stitched to give me the blue background. But it is, at the beginning of the week, it was really annoying me, and there are things with this piece, I'm not going to point them out, but there are some things that are happening that I'm not very happy with, and I actually considered restarting this, but I'm so far along, I just can't imagine starting over again because I've made so much progress. So I think I'm going to live with the imperfections that I am seeing, and just hope that everything turns out okay. But I would highly recommend avoiding 3 strands of floss, because I don't know, it's been kind of hard this week. I'm happy with my progress, and I'm not giving up on it. I'm going to continue working on it, but especially at the beginning of the week, I was really considering giving up on it and starting it again. I had somebody on Instagram that wanted to see the back of this, so I'm going to show you the back. Yeah, it's not the neatest of things. The method that I stitch, if there's not any confetti, the back looks really nice. But if there's lots of confetti like there is down here, then it gets kind of messy. But so here's my back. You can kind of see the diagonals, how I'm stitching in diagonal when you look from the back, because you can see the ridges where it's basically where you carry your thread from one diagonal to another. So yeah, there's my back, and you can kind of see here I've stitched different ways working through these stitches as well, so it looks a little bit different there. But that's what stitching diagonally, what a lot of my backs look like if I'm stitching full coverage diagonally. They look something like that. Unless the coverage is unless the confetti is really bad, and then it's kind of a mess back there. But there we go. Amid Amish life. So, what am I going to work on this week? I am excited for this. It has been too long, and I am looking forward to stitching this. I am going to be stitching a Saviour's Praise. This is a design by Teresa Vinette of Shakespeare's Peddler. This came out during market last year and caught my attention. So it's been, I think I'm coming up on a year with this piece. And I am I'll show you what it looks like now. So this fabric is 40 count Beach Brew, and I'm stitching with the called for threads. 1/2. This is the first time I've stitched on 40 count. In the past, I've been kind of nervous about stitching on 40 count because it sounded like it'd be too small. But I'm starting to like 40 count a whole bunch, and I'm really liking how this is turning out. So I stitched all of this, and now I'm working across. I think I'm halfway through the trees, and then if I remember right, there's a house on the hill over here. So I'm going to continue working through the trees. Hopefully I can finish all the trees and start working on the house. I would love to be able to make it to the house. I'm really happy with this, and I'm excited to see how much I can get done. So I'll give you a little bit closer look. I know people like to see things up close so that they can see how things are looking. So yeah, I think I'm going to be stitching trees and cardinals. There's like 3 or 4 more trees, and those will take a few days to stitch, I think. So yeah, like I say, I'm really excited to work on this week, and it's been calling my name a little bit, so I'm looking forward to it. So I've been suffering from startitis a little bit. I think I've mentioned that my rotation right now, because of the way I've done it, it's gotten to the point where my oldest pieces are, I'm going from oldest to youngest. And, you know, I think this happens to everybody. As you work on a project more and more, you kind of get tired of it. I am tired of my old pieces, and am really excited to get to the younger pieces, especially the pieces that I started last month. So I think when I finish this rotation, I think I'm going to shake things up a bit. I've got some ideas of what I'm going to do, but we'll talk about that when we get to that point. Anyway, yeah, so that is about all that I have for you. I hope that you have a great week, and as always, if you want to follow my daily progress, you can follow me on Instagram. I am at blitstitch on Instagram, and you can see I post daily progress of what I've been stitching. As always, feel free to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That way you can know when I post new videos. I always appreciate your comments and would be glad to answer any comments or questions that you have. And also feel free to like this video if you've enjoyed it. Thank you for all my new subscribers. I have received quite a few new subscribers in the last couple of weeks, and I'm glad that you are here and hope that you will continue to watch my videos. I hope that you have a great week and that everything goes well for you, and we will talk to you later. Goodbye.